Arian Dreshaj was only 28 years old, but he was running one of the most dangerous drug networks in East London. From the outside, he looked like just another influencer, designer clothes, fast cars and champagne nights. But behind the filters, he was the mastermind of a £1.3 million criminal empire. He called himself Ari HB, the face of the Hellbanianz gang, and for years he flaunted power, mocked police, and lived like he was untouchable. But what Arian didn't know was that one parcel, one blurry reflection, and one fake hitman would expose everything. This is how it all came crashing down. In Barking, East London, a quiet revolution was taking place. The Gascoigne estate, once seen as just another grey cluster of council flats, had turned into something different. Expensive cars now cruised through its narrow streets. Mercedes AMGs and Range Rovers with tinted windows were parked where broken bikes used to be. Teenagers, once seen kicking footballs in the courtyard, now watched silently as young men stepped out of designer tracksuits and into nightlife-ready wardrobes. Even in the middle of the day, people noticed the change, but no one spoke about it. Not out loud. At the heart of this transformation was a group known as the Hellbanianz. Originally a street-level crew of Albanian immigrants and second-generation youths. They were once dismissed as low-level troublemakers, but within a few years, they had become a silent force. Their presence felt more than seen. Unlike the old-school gangs who operated in shadows, the Hellbanianz didn't hide. They flaunted. Their Instagram profiles showed stacks of cash laid across hotel beds, selfies with gold-plated guns, and endless clips of club nights soaked in champagne. The captions were bold, the music was loud, and the message was clear: they were untouchable. But behind the filters and flashes was an operation as disciplined as any corporate structure. Every movement was calculated. Drugs didn't move randomly. From distribution houses in Barking, Ilford, and Newham, product was delivered across multiple postcodes with chilling efficiency. Cocaine and heroin came in bulk shipments, often hidden in vehicles imported through European ports. Cannabis farms bloomed quietly in rented properties, their windows covered and electricity stolen through tampered meters. At street level, young runners were trained to blend in, change phones regularly, and keep their heads down. Every package handed off was tracked, every pound counted, and anyone who slipped up was replaced without warning. Police were aware. Reports came in regularly. Noise complaints, suspicions about unusual night deliveries, even sightings of weapons. But there was never enough to stick. Those arrested rarely had anything on them. Their phones were wiped, their stories aligned. On paper, most of them were unemployed. In reality, they were sitting on more cash than some city bankers. And the money didn't just stay local, it moved through crypto wallets, into shell companies, and out to properties in Spain, Albania, and Dubai. Cars were registered in fake names, businesses were used to wash the earnings. One shisha lounge in East London, always half empty, somehow earned thousands every week. By late 2021, the Hellbanianz were estimated to control a drug network worth over £1.3 million. And still, no one had been seriously caught. Their power wasn't just built on drugs, it was built on fear, loyalty, and style. Younger kids on the estate looked up to them. Local rappers name-dropped them. Older residents avoided eye contact, and anyone thinking of crossing them was either silenced or warned off without needing a single threat. They looked like kings, moved like ghosts, and believed the police would never catch up. For a while, they were right. In December, just as the city dipped into winter silence, a small mistake slipped through the cracks of a carefully built empire. It started with a parcel. Nothing special at first glance. A plain brown box, no branding, just a printed label with a fake name and a rented flat address in Ilford. It was part of a much larger system, one that relied on anonymity, speed, and regularity. These parcels arrived weekly, sometimes daily. Inside, compressed packages of white powder were vacuum sealed, wrapped in layers of cling film, coated in grease and motor oil to confuse sniffer dogs, and then concealed inside hollowed-out electronics or disguised among auto parts. The packaging was clever, the routes were calculated, the senders changed frequently. The names on the boxes were always clean, but this time, the parcel didn't slide through unnoticed. During a routine scan at a Royal Mail sorting facility, the parcel was flagged for an irregular density reading. It was supposed to contain car engine parts, but the scan showed something more compact, more uniform. A worker raised a report, not expecting much. Within hours, a controlled inspection was carried out. What they found inside was unmistakable. 3 dense bricks of powder, later confirmed to be high-purity cocaine, with a street value upwards of $100. It was a major seizure, but at that point, just another blip on the radar of drug enforcement. The recipient's details were fake, the address linked to a short-term rental paid in cash. Cases like these often went cold, until the forensic team found a partial fingerprint on the inner layer of packaging. It was faint, nearly useless, but a partial match came back. It belonged to a 19-year-old male previously arrested in Barking for a minor assault during a pub fight. He was known, not feared. On record, he had no major convictions, no proven links to organized crime, but he had been seen once or twice in the company of people the police did care about. It was enough to bring him in for questioning. Under pressure, and faced with the possibility of a trafficking charge, the young man gave up a name, not a major figure but a familiar one. He named a local runner, someone who acted as a go-between, collecting parcels, delivering packages, and collecting cash. That name opened a new door. Surveillance began immediately. The runner, unaware that anything had changed, carried on with his routine. He visited a shisha lounge 3 nights a week, drove a gray Audi A3 with cloned plates, and regularly met with a man whose identity the police were still trying to confirm. The routine was recorded in detail: plate numbers, drop points, and even the pattern of his movements. One of the officers noted how methodical he was. He never used the same route twice in a week. He always switched phones mid-conversation. He walked for 10 minutes before and after entering buildings. This wasn't amateur behavior. It was training. Someone had taught him how to stay invisible. That one seized parcel, chosen by chance for inspection, became the first true crack in a drug empire that had seemed unbreakable. The digital world had always been a playground for the Hellbanianz. They didn't just tolerate attention, they invited it. Social media wasn't a risk to them. It was part of the strategy. Their posts were loud, aggressive, and deliberate. Pictures of designer watches stacked beside lines of cash, clips from overseas trips to Marbella or Dubai, expensive bottles popped in clubs, and all of it was posted openly, under usernames that mocked the idea of law enforcement. It was a lifestyle brand as much as it was a gang. But what they didn't realize was that their arrogance was building a blueprint. Every post, every like, every comment created a trail of timestamps and GPS data. Investigators, once sidelined by the gang's lack of physical evidence, now turned their attention to the digital realm. It wasn't one post that gave them what they needed, it was the pattern. The frequency of certain locations, the background clues, the timestamps that matched known deliveries. One photo in particular stood out. A gang member had posted a selfie in what looked like a generic kitchen, showing off a gold chain and stacks of cash. But behind him, blurred in the background, was a reflection in a microwave door. The reflection showed a computer screen with what looked like a messaging app open. Image analysts got to work, enhancing the blur, clearing the contrast, running it through filters. Eventually they made out a word, encrochat. For months, European law enforcement had quietly been running a massive covert operation. They had cracked the encrypted communication network used by thousands of criminals across Europe. While the Hellbanians believed their messages were invisible, police had been reading them for weeks. The microwave reflection wasn't proof on its own, but it confirmed a theory. The gang used encrypted phones to run their empire. Through cooperation with international agencies, A stream of historic EncroChat data tied to suspected users in Barking was obtained. The messages were brutal in their simplicity. Orders to move product, updates on cash pickups, warnings about police movements, and even private arguments over territory. Most importantly, there were names, usernames linked to real people, patterns of movement that matched known gang behavior. One message described a drop happening at a Tesco car park in Dagenham at a time that exactly matched a previously unsolved narcotics handoff caught on CCTV. Another outlined instructions to burn everything from Ilford by next Friday, followed by silence from one user who disappeared entirely from the digital network after that date. The intelligence was overwhelming, and it connected dots that had remained isolated for months. The gang's hierarchy began to take shape, from street-level runners up to the coordinator who never touched the product himself. The arrogance that once fueled their public image had turned against them. Their pride, their obsession with attention, their need to show power, all of it had been recorded, shared, and now used as evidence. What had once looked like strength now looked like carelessness, and in the world of organized crime, carelessness was fatal. As the investigation deepened, police intelligence units started to identify the cracks forming within the gang's internal structure. Most of the operation had run like a machine, efficient, silent, loyal, but pressure from outside was building. Surveillance revealed missed meetings, unusually long communication gaps, and members changing vehicles and phones more frequently than usual. Something had shifted. The once tight chain of command began to look unstable. Detectives knew this moment was critical. Gangs rarely collapse from the top down. They rot from the inside out, often starting with fear, paranoia, or betrayal. It was time to accelerate that process. Among the gang's many foot soldiers, one name stood out. The 26-year-old, known as Leka. He wasn't high up, but he wasn't disposable either. He collected money, delivered drugs, and occasionally acted as a bridge between lieutenants. He had recently purchased a one-way ticket to Albania, set to leave within a week. That alone didn't confirm anything, but combined with a series of encrypted messages from earlier that month, now decrypted, it became clear Leka had been under scrutiny from his own crew. Someone had accused him of being watched by police. Whether it was true or not didn't matter. Paranoia inside the gang was enough to spark a reaction. The network was deeper, more connected, and more dangerous than anyone had first guessed. But now, it was exposed. At 4:30 a.m., while most of East London slept, over 100 officers prepared for the largest coordinated gang raid the area had seen in years. Operation Grey Ash, months in planning, was now fully activated. 14 addresses across Barking, Ilford, and Dagenham were marked as priority targets. Surveillance drones hovered quietly in the dark skies, while armed units moved silently through alleyways and back entrances. Each team had clear instructions: secure suspects, preserve evidence, and avoid warning the rest of the network. Surprise was essential. The entire Hellbanianz structure depended on communication and fast reaction. The police had to be fast. When the raids began, they were swift and brutal in precision. At one flat in the Gascoigne estate, officers forced entry and found two men asleep on the living room sofa, surrounded by counting machines, cash bundles, and cling film-wrapped parcels. In the kitchen, under a false bottom in the cupboard, sat 3 handguns and a sawn-off shotgun, along with ammunition stuffed into empty cereal boxes. In another property, a woman tried to flush white powder down the toilet while officers broke down the bathroom door. Several locations revealed the same pattern: drugs, weapons, money, and a surprising number of forged documents, including fake driving licenses, utility bills, and passports. But the biggest discovery came from a 3-bedroom rental house on a quiet residential street in Barking. Behind a wardrobe in the master bedroom, officers uncovered a hidden trap door. Beneath it was a concealed storage space that contained more than £400,000 in tightly wrapped cash, several USB drives, and ledgers written in a mix of English and Albanian. Each ledger tracked quantities, initials and codes that matched previous digital records obtained through EncroChat. One entry listed transactions going back nearly 4 years, documenting profits, losses, and shipments with an accountant's accuracy. This wasn't just street crime. This was a criminal enterprise with organized books and international branches. Over the course of the morning, 21 individuals were arrested. 8 of them were considered high-value targets directly connected to the upper layers of the gang. Charges included conspiracy to supply Class A drugs, firearms possession, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Some suspects were caught trying to destroy phones as officers breached their doors. Others were shocked, convinced they had outsmarted law enforcement, but their silence was no longer protection. The evidence spoke louder than any of them could have. The media descended on the scene within hours. Headlines painted the takedown as a major victory against organized crime. Police press conferences highlighted the scale of the operation and the complexity of the gang's reach. Community leaders praised the cleanup of their streets, relieved that the intimidation and late-night fear might finally be over. On the surface, the Hellbanianz had collapsed. Their flashy presence vanished. The cars disappeared. The social media accounts went silent. For the first time in years, the estate felt still. But in a quiet corner of East London, away from flashing lights and news cameras, a teenager watched from his balcony. He had seen the raids, heard the sirens, and understood what had happened. And as he scrolled through old photos of chains, guns, and stacks of cash, a thought crossed his mind. Empires fall, but someone always builds a new one. Another empire built on fear, now buried in evidence. Subscribe for more true crime stories that expose the underworld. This was just one fall. Many more are coming. Many more are coming.